Redburn walked past the ComGuard technicians who were tinkering with the innards of a tall, gaunt-looking Black Knight. The heavy mech's design was an old one, stretching back to the time of the Star League. Weighing 75 tons, the Knight mounted a PPC backed up by a six-pack of lasers. Like good race car mechanics who were never satisfied with the machines under their care, the techs had pulled a number of access panels from the Knight's armored surface and were going over its systems, trying to coax just one more gram worth of performance out of the war machine. Sword and Fire, page 18, by Thomas S. Gressman.
No innocent man ever rebelled against lawful authority, and we, the Star League, are the law. Coordinator Hihiro Kurita.
While some of the battle mechs created during the reign of the Star League were forged in a time of optimism, the first real-world testing for the BL-6 KNT Black Knight was among the Star League Defense Force regiments that were sent to pummel the Taurian Concordat into submission. This was an act of realpolitik. After years of attempting to bring the Concordat into the Star League fold through economic shenanigans and failed diplomatic efforts, the Cameron regime, along with the House Lords, saw military conquest as the only remaining viable option to unite humanity under their banner. Though the various periphery nations that circled the Inner Sphere responded with varying levels of animosity to the idea, the Taurians were particularly less than enthused. So when the 1st and 2nd Divisions of the SLDF jumped into the Ridgebrook system along with warship escorts and elements of the 3rd Battle Fleet on the 15th of May in 2778, it was clear that both sides would choose violence. The Taurians brought their own fleet into position defending Ridgebrook, the primary inhabited world. In what turned into a 5-hour slugfest between fleets, both sides suffered heavy losses, including multiple warships and 10 SLDF dropships that were carrying more than a regiment of soldiers and equipment. These losses were only the prelude for a more brutal and devastating conflict. Among the 1st and 2nd Division SLDF forces that did successfully land and create a beachhead on Ridgebrook was the brand new 75-ton Black Knight battlemech produced by Kong Interstellar Corporation. The company had high hopes for the new mech, which featured a cutting-edge Technocron 1L endosteel frame and was deliberately designed to present a visage of nobility and power. While the man-in-armor theme for battle mechs is hardly unusual by the Succession Wars and into the 32nd century, the Black Knight arguably does it the best, with its 13 tons of armor plating configured in a very human analog manner, including what appears to be a medieval helmet for the battle mech's head. Kong went one step further by incorporating a superior Transcom Alpha communication system and a Beagle active probe to the Black Knight, making it an ideal candidate for frontline officers who needed to keep tabs on battlefield conditions and troop movements. The Black Knight's Vlar 300 standard fusion engine set its top speed at 65 km per hour or a 460 movement profile. This was on par with other mechs at that 75-ton weight point. The Battlemech's 20 standard heatsinks were a big investment, but as we're going to see with the loadout, it was a necessary one. The Black Knight's primary weapons consisted of a pair of large lasers split between the side torsos and a right arm mounted particle projection cannon. If fired together, these three weapons produced 26 heat, which could swamp the BK's heatsinks. When challenged on this issue, Kong's leadership suggested that the Mechwarriors refrain from doing such silly things. It reminds me of that old routine where the guy goes to the doctor with a sore elbow and says, "Doctor, doctor, it hurts when I do this," and the doctor responds with, "Well, then don't do that." At close range, 4 standard medium lasers were scattered, 1 to each arm and side torso, and finally an emotional support small laser was added to the mech's head. Firing everything in an alpha strike while on the run, as foolish as that would be, earned the Black Knight 41 heat, minus the 20 from the heatsinks left the net heat at 21. That included a heavy penalty to movement, aiming, and a shutdown only avoided on a 6+. At least the mech didn't carry any ammunition, which could cook off on a 4+. Overall, the BL-6 Black Knight is significantly hobbled by its use of an all-energy weapon build, without the benefit of double heatsinks. Still, it was a powerful machine, and if you used it wisely and were willing to get down to your underwear in the cockpit to help beat the heat, it could melt the faces of your enemies pretty quickly. A Black Knight came up to flank her just as she saw the fallen form of Shorty's Lancelot. Rhonda bit her lip. In the dim evening light, the mech was still glowing hot where the weapon's fire had heated its internal structure. A small pool of fire seemed to belch from its torso, spilling onto the ground and lighting the grass on fire. The Lancelot was not moving. The Black Knight was. It swept its PPC toward her, and she felt her mech quake from a wave of short-range missiles fired from another enemy. She played the joystick with consummate skill, landing the target sight squarely on the moving Black Knight. It stopped on a small rise and fired even as she did. Call of Duty, page 67, by Blaine Lee Pardoe. When the SLDF forces began their land assault on Ridgebrook, they were initially met with very light resistance for the first few days. When the 2nd Division landed their dropships near the planet's capital city, Estacada, the Taurian defenders unleashed a heavy barrage of artillery and missile fire from their dug-in positions in the nearby Golden Ridge Mountains. 2 dropships, along with 2 battalions of mechs and armor, were disabled or completely destroyed by the barrage. Now unable to take the city without first dislodging the Taurians from the mountains, the next 4 months devolved the carefully planned assault into a gruesome siege. The SLDF planners expected a swift early victory on Ridgebrook, and not even the Black Knight could make that happen. When the last of the Taurians were dragged out of their ruined bunkers in September of 2578, fewer than 100 were still alive. Ridgebrook would end up setting the stage for a much stronger than expected resistance against the SLDF. Though the Black Knight was deemed a success and production started in haste to make up for the SLDF losses throughout the Reunification War, the clock was ticking both on the Star League and for all the battlemechs that relied upon cutting-edge technology. That included our friend, the Black Knight BL-6. Just 2 years following the dissolution of the Star League, the orbital facilities that produced the endosteel used for the Black Knight were destroyed, and the advanced electronics package, including the Beagle active probe, couldn't be produced either, requiring a significant redesign for the battlemech. Kong Interstellar really had little choice in the matter, as the Black Knight was their primary moneymaker. Designers looked at the mech and made cuts where they needed in order to swap to a standard internal frame and electronics package. The resulting BL-7 Black Knight was first produced in 2809, and it carried Kong through the succession wars as demand remained high. Luckily, the downgrades weren't as painful for the Black Knight as they were for some of the other Star League-era battlemechs. The BL-7 retained its 20 single heatsinks and weapons loadout, but lost 2 tons of armored coverage. This more vulnerable Black Knight kept its punch, but it was now protected by 1 less ton armor than the 4L Guillotine, 3.5 tons less than the ON-1K Orion, and a half ton less than the Marauder 3R. As far as Succession War downgrades went, I'd say the Black Knight made out like a bandit. Lowry slammed the control sticks hard over. In response, her Victor twisted at the waist. She jerked the triggers, snapping off a hasty volley at the attackers. Her lasers dug into the tough armored hide of an enemy Black Knight, but the short-range missiles all fell short, scattering chunks of pavement across the mech's feet. The Knight responded with a blast from its PPC that ripped away the last of the armor on the Victor's left arm. Lowry heard the groan of overstressed metal as the endosteel of the mech's chassis all but collapsed under the particle beam's savage caress. The Dying Time, page 133 by Thomas S. Gressman. Throughout the Succession Wars, production of the Black Knight was limited, and the stock that each of the great houses had on hand from the various SLDF units that joined them gradually declined through attrition and lack of spare parts. This resulted in a variety of field refits, which made an encounter with a Black Knight a roll of the dice concerning what you might be facing. The one official Succession Wars refit to the mech was designated the BL-7 KNTL, and it was a result of severe shortages of particle projection cannons across the Free Worlds League. The 7L dropped the PPC in the right arm in favor of a third large laser and 2 additional heatsinks. This created the curious opportunity for the Black Knight's Mechwarrior to fire all 3 large lasers while on the run and only end up at 4+ heat into the red, which is entirely manageable when the time is right. At close range, firing all 4 medium lasers at a target, along with 1 of the large lasers while on the run, was heat neutral. Overall, the Black Knight 7L ended up being a pretty savvy build, and one that I actually prefer over the standard 7 variant. Both crabs fired again, this time with their large lasers. The Black Knight seemed to emerge from the wall of smoke, its torso black and more mangled than usual. Mechwarrior fired again at the rear of the king crab, this time with her short-range missiles. They hit the mech's legs near the back of the knee, and for a moment she thought she might topple the Widowmaker mech. It seemed to waver, then catch itself like a drunk resisting the force of gravity. Robertson's Black Knight fought for its life as he struggled to shift position, to stay in the battle, to buy time and distance. Each step seemed painful, as if it were a crippled animal. The king crabs were slower, but kept a tight bead on their prey, moving to surround him. They both fired again. This time the autocannon streams engulfed the Black Knight in a funnel of black, churning smoke. Betrayal of Ideals, page 83 by Blanley Pardoe. The next official variant of the Black Knight wouldn't hit the scene until the late 3040s, but before then we do need to talk about the BL6 KNT Black Knight owned by one Ian McKinnon, the commander of the Fox's Teeth. This Davion-aligned mercenary unit was known for their bold and borderline reckless actions in battle, which often threw their opponents, usually the Cretans, off guard. Ian McKinnon's Black Knight was inherited from his father in a heavily damaged state. When it was rebuilt in 3038, it benefited from cutting-edge technology sources from the big brains on New Avalon. From then on, known as the BL6 KNT Black Knight Ian, it had a standard internal structure and engine, but received triple-strength myomer and 11.5 tons of prototype ferrofibrous armor. This provided 206 points of protection, which was roughly a 15% boost in armor coverage over the BL7. Additionally, the variant's 15 heatsinks were supplemented by the addition of 3 prototype freezer double heatsinks, which pushed the overall sinking capacity to 18 per turn. The weapons loadout doesn't stray too far from the original, with a PPC in the right arm, 2 large lasers split between the side torsos, and 4 medium lasers scattered across the mech's upper torso and arms. However, the last edition provided some bite, as the hatchet was added to the mech's left arm. Combined with triple-strength myomer, the hot-running Black Knight turned its vice into a virtue with additional movement speed and increased physical damage. Overall, anytime you're dealing with triple-strength myomer, the learning curve for the Black Knight is going to be steep. It's definitely not a mech you would want to give to a new Mechwarrior. Gordon seized the opportunity. He was still too far beyond Tomo's heat threshold to safely trigger her lasers, but her fist and aggro saw were more than enough. Tomo lunged at the fallen Hellbringer and pummeled it mercilessly. An armored foot stomped through its shoulder, severing its PPC, and the aggro saw sparked across the fallen mech's chest. Cattell forced the Hellbringer to stand as blows rained down on it. Lasers pulsed, blasting into Tomo's chest, but Gordon felt no fear. He hacked and slashed and pounded, his vision gone blood red. At last the saw sheared clear through one of the Hellbringer's knee actuators, and the machine fell to the ground once again. The Plowshare, page 20 by D.G.P. Rector, Shrapnel number 11. Though the Black Knight would see a Helm memory core upgrade, it wasn't created by Kong Interstellar, but by Comstar, who performed the upgrades in preparation for facing down the clans. The BL-8 KNT Black Knight was deployed on Tukayyid in 3052, and it received significant structural and weapon upgrades that helped it earn its Clanbuster title. Indosteel made its return with the BL-9, as well as an extra light fusion engine. The movement profile 460 didn't change, but it did buy mass for use elsewhere, including 13.5 tons of standard plate armor. The BL-9 also received the long-needed double heatsink upgrade, with 15 able to vastly improve the mech's cooling capacity. As is so often the case with this era's upgrades, the heat-sinking benefits of the new technology were tempered by hotter weaponry. For the BL-9 Black Knight, the upgrade to an ER-PPC in that right arm location was the primary offender, though it was hardly alone. The 2 traditional large lasers in the side torsos were surprisingly left alone, and they were joined by a large pulse laser installed into the center torso. 4 medium lasers were all upgraded to the pulse variety, trading range for accuracy and a slight power increase. Finally, a hatchet was added to the left arm that could supplement the largely close-range laser build. Taking on that XL engine did make the Black Knight BL-9 more vulnerable to catastrophic internal strikes, but it was aided by additional armor and much improved close-range punch. Alpha strikes were still out of the question for the most part, as doing so while on the run left the BL-9 at 25 heat into the red. This would bring with it a chance to shut down on a failed roll of 6+ and a -5 movement profile penalty, along with a +4 modifier to firing. While it is still technically possible to do this and survive in the right circumstances, most of the time it would leave you a sitting duck to incoming fire. When the clans landed on Tukayyid, the Black Knight was a key component of the Comguard defensive forces. The Knight could pepper targets at range with the ERPPC, and when the opportunity arose, close in rapidly, intensifying the amount of fire the mech could deliver. The Precentor Marshal held back. I gave the battle to Harvison, now it's his to fight. He knows what he's doing, and concentrating fire seemed to be effective. Will it be effective enough, though? Harvison's Black Knight targeted the Blackhawk again. The PPC again struck the clan mech in the crater of the chest, all but denuding it of armor. The green beam of the large laser gobbled up armor on the Blackhawk's right arm, reducing the protection there by half. The Blackhawk engaged the Black Knight again, cutting loose with its medium lasers. Prince of Havoc, page 49 through 50, by Michael A. Stackpole. In 3055, the Black Knight Ian received yet another in a series of upgrades under the ownership of Ian McKinnon's son, Ross. The resulting BL-10 KNT Ross variant reflected an interesting attempt to further boost the mech's lethality. Sharing most of its elements from the earlier version, the Ross Black Knight carried 13 tons of ferrofibrous armor, the triple-strength myomer, and 15 double heat sinks. The ERPPC in the right arm, 3 medium pulse lasers, 2 ER medium lasers, and ER small laser all benefited from the installation of a targeting computer in the left torso. The combination of hatchet, targeting computer, triple-strength myomer, and standard fusion engine made the BL-10 Ross a terrifying opponent. The more accurate ERPPC offers no quarter at long range, and the medium lasers don't improve the situation for an attacker. While not an easy mech to wield due to the heat management required, this is one of the deadliest Black Knights yet in our timeline. The next official variant in the timeline has a mysterious backstory, and it's one that takes us way out into the periphery to an abandoned system near Antalos, which was once under the banner of the Outworlds Alliance. In 3057, when a grizzled jumpship captain hired a down-on-their-luck mercenary company to provide protection for a shady deal on the surface of one of the system's planets, all heck breaks loose. Instead of trading for the clan tech blueprints the jumpship captain wanted, the other party attacked the captain and her mercenary bodyguards with battle mechs that are either clan designs or were modified with clan tech weaponry. One of the mysterious mechs, without any markings or hints to its origins, was a Black Knight designated the BL-6RR. It looked a lot like the BL-6 Black Knight, but it benefited from inner sphere endosteel, carried 13 tons of standard plate armor, and sported 21 single heat sinks. The traditional PPC was upgraded to a Clan Tech ER PPC, and the 4 medium lasers were swapped out for the Clan ER variety. The 2 standard inner sphere large lasers weren't touched, nor was the head-mounted small laser or Beagle active probe. As impressive as the clan weaponry was on the Black Knight frame, the major limitation on the 6RR was the lack of double heatsink technology. Firing the ERPPC in just one of the large lasers pushed the mech into the red. Firing all 3 large energy weapons was just Babytown frolic. On the bright side, at medium range, firing the 4 clan ER medium lasers while on the run only net a +1 heat into the red. It just required having the discipline to hold back on all the rest of your weapons. Since the source of this mech is the royalty in Rogue's Mechwarrior scenario book, the ultimate fate of the mysterious Black Knight RR is unknown, and depended upon how successful the players were at facing down the threat. The GM is notified in the text to tell players that attempt to salvage the machine that there isn't enough time to do so. With that in mind, perhaps we can make the assumption that the Black Knight was either salvaged by whatever organization it was working with, or the husk of the battlemech remains on that planet in the system near Antalos. Sounds like a mission for the NEC. Meta turned away, seeking new prey. A brown and green camouflaged Black Knight stepped around the fallen, burning Jaegermech and leveled its PPC at her Cauldronborn. The actinic stream of highly charged particles tore into the Omnimech's side, just forward of the active probe radome. The sophisticated electronics lining her cockpit blinked as the powerful electrical charge delivered by the PPC bolt threatened to overload their circuits. It quickly dissipated. A beam of amplified light lanced out of the tall, gangly mech's chest to turn some of the armor on her left leg into a thick, molten stream that dripped, hissing to the ground. Shadows of War, page 207, by Thomas S. Gressman. The next leap forward in Black Knight shenanigans arrived in 3063 with the BL-12 KNT variant. It benefited from endosteel, returned to a standard fusion engine, and was protected by 13 tons of standard plate armor. Thankfully, double heatsinks make their return, and the BL-12 carries 16 of the little buggers. The weaponry doesn't stray too far from the norm with the installation of an ER-PPC into the right arm, 2 large lasers found at the left and right torsos, and 4 ER medium lasers scattered across the side torsos and arms. The gem in the BL-12 was the addition of the targeting computer to the left torso, which aids in the accuracy of the entire loadout. Heat management is still a chore, but if you fire in groupings, it's not too bad. The ER-PPC and 2 large lasers could be fired while on the run and only end up at +1 heat into the red, which is great. At close range, dropping the PPC and adding in the ER medium lasers while on the run yielded 6+ into the red, which isn't ideal for a 460 movement profile due to that -1 movement penalty next turn, but it's not egregious either. Dropping one of the large lasers the next turn could quickly get things back under control. Overall, the BL-12 KNT comes perilously close to being the ideal form for the battle mech. We'll just have to wait and see what happens down that timeline. As Seaforth moved laterally, Ramirez reached out with her Black Knight's right PPC. The extended-range beauty traced a cobalt beam toward the distant hill as a trebuchet, newly identified by my targeting computer, popped over the rise. The beam stabbed through the head, just below the helmet, burning through the cockpit, the pilot, and the back of the head all in one go. Forward momentum and a dead man's hand drove the mech into the hillside in an explosion of mud and rock. Mutual, Shrapnel, number 19, page 79, by James D. Long. Our next Black Knight is yet another specialized refit, though this mech was not used by some privileged house mercenary. Instead, the BLX KNT Black Knight, sometimes known as the Red Reaper, belonged to a man named Reginald Van Jaster, who was working on a rather unimpressive career fighting on Solaris 7. His life, like the lives of so many others, was upended by the word of Blake during the kerfuffle. He joined the resistance on Solaris and fought the Blakeists, building a reputation for ferocity, especially after he received the news that they had killed his wife. Any semblance of rationality or restraint melted away under Van Jaster's rage as he devoted himself to obliterating the word of Blake. He chased them, following the Blakeist retreat from the Solaris system, declaring all Blakeists and their supporters to be fair game for his fire and fury. Not even the rise of the Republic of the Sphere brought people peace from the Red Reaper, as Van Jaster declared the ROS to be a fake government secretly run by the word of Blake. He attacked military and civilian targets across the region, and it earned Van Jaster a place on the most wanted lists of both sides of the kerfuffle. The Red Reaper Black Knight was a heavily refitted variant that included a 300 XL fusion engine, 15 double heatsinks, and 13 tons of light ferrofibrous armor. The traditional right arm heavy weapon was instead devoted to carrying a large shield. The rules for shields are plentiful, so we won't go into them too deeply beyond stating the medium and large versions slow the mech by 1 movement point, but it can be used in a shield bash attack and can protect the mech from incoming damage up to a certain point. The specifics for it can be found on page 103 of the BattleTech Tactical Operations Advanced Units and Equipment Sourcebook. In the left arm, the Red Reaper carried a large vibroblade, which weighed 7 tons and filled 4 critical locations. When activated, the large vibroblade does 14 damage per hit. Deactivated damage would be 8 on a 75-ton battlemech. If you want the full rules, check out the Battlemech Manual, page 109, because the TAC Ops sourcebook explanation is not great. It's just really not great. As far as non-melee weapons go, the Red Reaper's primary punch is provided by a heavy PPC aided by a capacitor installed into the mech's left torso. With the capacitor charged, this could do 20 damage per shot out to 18 hexes, which is pretty terrifying. Backing up the heavy PPC, 5 medium X pulse lasers offered a slightly more accurate 6 damage per shot out to 9 hexes. The heat curve for the Red Reaper is atrocious if you fire all 5 of the X pulse lasers along with the heavy PPC, but most of the time the mech wouldn't be alpha striking. Much more likely, the heavy PPC would be the longer range weapon intended to breach a target, while the mech closes in to bring the lasers and vibroblade into action. Reginald Van Jaster managed to avoid being caught as of the last available information on him and his Red Reaper. Leaping ahead into the Dark Age, there are technically at least 4 variants for this time period. As this video is already going to be more than 30 minutes long, we're not going to be doing them one by one, especially not the one with the C3 computer or the 3A, which has an XL engine and endo-composite armor. Why? Because you're not my real dad and you don't get to tell me what to do. Unless you are my real dad, and if you're watching this, technically you could tell me what to do, but now that I'm in my mid-40s, those are more suggestions than commands. Now where was I? The variant I do want to talk about is the BLK-NT5H. It shows up in the timeline in 3138 and is the next to last official variant that we're going to cover today. Why did I pick it over the other Dark Age options? Because it's crazy fun to play with, and we get some good fluff thanks to the 3145 technical readout. At this point in the timeline, production of the Black Knight is still being done by Kong Interstellar, but it has also been joined by Robinson Standard Battleworks on the planet Robinson. Where they came up with their company name is a question for the ages. Robinson was responsible for the string of Dark Age variants, which we didn't cover, and by the 3140s, prospective buyers were looking for something more definitive from the company. There was actually a running joke for mech warriors assigned to the mech that they had to check the manual to figure out which configuration was waiting for them. No one wanted 4 different variants for the same mech that each required specialized repair parts. Your logistics officers will hate you and end up shipping your footlocker to Butte Hold out of spite. The BLK-NT5H, from here on out referred to as just the 5H, is a good representation of Robinson's efforts to mesh newer intersphere technology with clan tech weapons in hope of creating a truly dangerous Black Knight. Starting with an endo-composite frame and a 300 light fusion engine, the 5H is significantly different structurally from previous Black Knight entries. It carried 13.5 tons of standard plate armor in a configuration that gave the mech a completely new look. The only clan tech incorporated into the structure beyond the weapons were 17 clan tech double heatsinks. Starting at long range, the DDS Kingston Extended Range PPC was installed into the right arm, and it was backed up by 2 even longer range Exostar Pinnacle ER large lasers split between the side torsos. At mid-range, 2 Exostar ER medium lasers were also split between the side torsos, and because if 2 lasers are good, 3 is better, 2 Exostar small pulse lasers were also added. For close-range conflict resolution, 2 emotional support ER small lasers were split between the left and right arms. All of these weapons were aided by an inner sphere targeting computer placed into the right torso, which weighed in at 5 tons and took up 5 critical locations. The last addition to the 5H Black Knight was a medium shield in the right arm, which, as we discussed earlier, can be used to absorb incoming damage while also doing additional damage in a bashing physical attack. As with previous variants, the number of powerful weapons crammed into this Black Knight made it incredibly dangerous. That danger, which feels like a broken record at this point, is tempered by the 17 double heatsinks, which limit how many lasers can be brought to bear on a target at any one time. The BLK-NT5H is an incredible machine thanks to its use of advanced and clan technology, and it's worth a try if you're ever this far down the timeline. In-universe reports from the 5H were positive, with the mech being spotted during the recent conflict between the Draconis Combine and the Federated Suns. On Mokane in 3144, a duel was fought between the Combine Hatamoto Chi and an AFFS Black Knight piloted by the malicious Colonel. The 2 mechs circled each other on an open battlefield at long range, pelting each other with shots, while the Colonel's Black Knight stayed out of range of the Combine's Shosa's medium-range missiles. Gauss rifle shots from the Hatamoto Chi were answered with accurate ERPPC fire, and eventually the Combine mech was riddled with severe damage and visibly limping. A Gauss round shattered the Black Knight's hip assembly, and as the fire from both sides tapered off, the Hatamoto Chi pushed forward to finish off its opponent. Using the Black Knight's shield, the militia colonel absorbed incoming fire while holding his ground. Before the Shosa could end the fight, the Black Knight lashed out with an alpha strike that sent the mech into immediate shutdown. When the colonel woke up after passing out due to the heat, he discovered that he had won the duel after coring out the Hatamoto Chi. The entire duel turned out to be an interesting footnote in the temporary Combine conquest of Mokane. Our last official variant for the Black Knight is the product of Kong Interstellar, who looked at what Robinson's Standard Battleworks was doing with the mech in their series of upgrades and sought to take their own stab at updating the popular design. The resulting BL-18 KNT was intended for purchase by the Republic of the Sphere, and it looks similar to the 5H in several ways. Once again, the Black Knight benefits from the installation of a light fusion engine and an inner sphere endocomposite frame. The 13 tons of standard plate armor was left alone, but Kong finally was able to go all in with the connection with the Sea Foxes to add 20 clan-grade double heatsinks. They would be needed as the BL-18 carried a good selection of clan lasers and a clan ER-PPC. The particle projection cannon sat in the traditional right arm, while the two ER large lasers were split between the side torsos. These three made up the long-range weaponry. As we move into mid and short range, 4 clan ER medium lasers are spread across the arms and side torsos, 1 apiece. A clan small pulse laser was added to the head, and finally a Beagle active probe was reinstalled into the center torso. All of the lasers were aided in their accuracy with an inner sphere targeting computer located in the right torso. The heat management is not too shabby for this one, as the user could fire the ER-PPC in both ER large lasers while on the run and only end up at +1 heat into the red. At closer range, it's easy enough to trade the ER large lasers for the 4 ER mediums to keep up the pressure and to cool off at the same time. The ER-PPC and 4 ER medium lasers only generated 37 heat on the run, so that could easily sink away 3 turns worth of heat with the larger lasers firing on the way in. Not a bad plan. Overall, the BL-18 Black Knight is a pretty strong contender for the mech in its ideal form. It's powerful at all ranges, has decent armor coverage, and doesn't rely upon any ammunition. The only downsides are downsides that are shared by all the other knights in the past, i.e. that 460 movement profile and the requirement for savvy heat management. Now, before we head off into the sunset on this dusty trail, I do want to take a crack at creating my own variant of the Black Knight. It was based on the BL-18. In fact, I changed nothing about the core structure except for adding 3 jump jets, which pushed the movement profile to 463 and added a bit of agility to an otherwise plodding mech. 22 clan double heat sinks keep the mech mostly cool, and the 13 tons of standard plate armor were left untouched. As far as weaponry goes, we're going to lean into the particle projection cannon through the addition of a clan ER-PPC to the right arm, backed up at the mid-range by 2 snub-nosed PPCs split between the side torsos and 2 clan ER medium lasers stuffed into the mech's left arm. Finally, an emotional support clan ER small laser was added to the head open critical location. While the Black Knight 1MF can pelt targets at a distance with its clan ER-PPC, it really shines at 13 hexes and closer with all 3 PPCs at medium range. 5, 8, and 8 damage is decent, and when you hit that magic 9 hex mark it becomes 5, 10, and 10, with the possibility of adding 2 ER medium lasers when the time is right. As far as heat goes, the 1MF doesn't have to worry until the ER mediums are brought into play. Even then, in a full alpha strike while on the run, the net heat at the end of the turn is just 3+ into the red. The 3 jump jets add a nice unusual element to the design, and overall I think the Black Knight is a perfect candidate to show off the accuracy of these snub-nosed PPCs, ideally about 5 feet from the cockpit of a Clan Wolf Battlemech's cockpit. Another few stray rounds exploded near the Coyote Khan, bringing her to the here and now. Kamlan's defenders were straying closer, and that angered her. Dana targeted a rebel Orion that had come too close and fired her PPC and 2 large lasers at it. The mech disappeared briefly amid the fury of her attack, re-emerging splayed out on the ground. Dana fired again before its pilot had a chance to react, catching it as it tried to regain its footing. The Orion's Mechwarrior failed. Dreams of Babylon, page 7, Operation Klondike Sourcebook. Sourcebook writers Chris Hartford, Christopher Bones Trosson, and David L. McCulloch. In the life or death equivalent of this could have been an email, the Black Knight remains a fearsome foe no matter where it is found on the timeline. Its energy weapon builds, sturdy man and armor frame, and solid performance across the timeline justify the respect and reverence that mech warriors both in and outside of the universe have for it. The pedigree for the Black Knight includes famous warriors such as Elizabeth Hazen and Ian McKinnon, and it was even used as a basis for one of the clan's early Omnimech designs called the Spirit Walker. From the Reunification War to the fall of Terra under the tyrant Alaric, the Black Knight has served and will continue to serve. and that's why we love it. What do you think is the best and most ideal Black Knight variant? Have you had luck with it on your battlefields? Let me know in the comments and we'll keep the conversation going. Thank you as always for sticking around this long. I hope you have a happy and healthy 2025. If you haven't already, hitting that like and subscribe button is the best way to grant me the happy brain chemicals that make this all worthwhile. To those who already have and even gone one step further to become channel members or support through Ko-fi, thank you. Without you, none of this would be possible. Have a great week, and please go out and make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.